Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Fertility Confidence Podcast. Last week, I got to sit down with David Ireland, the founder of an amazing platform, Fertility for Men, which is dedicated to helping men take charge of their reproductive health, which he founded after experiencing many years of unexplained infertility with him and his wife. And he wanted to create a platform that had all of the resources, the experts that he felt he didn't get through the beginning of his journey. And if you guys are a listener of the podcast, you know that talking about male fertility and men's health is actually something that I value and think is incredibly important. This journey, this fertility experience isn't just about the women, but it's about the men as well. And we need not only for men to be involved in the process, but I think there's still a very large stigma around male factor fertility where we don't talk about it a ton. There's a lot of support out there for women now. There's still not a lot of support for men. So I'm really happy. I was really happy to connect with David and get to share his platform with our listeners because I think it can make a really big difference out in the fertility space, and getting to hear firsthand David's experience with going through unexplained infertility. So if your partner isn't a listener of the podcast, this may be a really amazing episode for them to just feel not alone. We had a great conversation about, what changes we'd love to see in fertility care when it comes to men's health and the coaching industry, and how valuable getting support and how to support your partner, both how the male can support the female partner and etc., how you can be there and come together and work as a team, and how important that is on the fertility journey. So thank you for pushing play today. Before we get in to the rest of the interview, a quick thank you to our amazing podcast sponsor, Needed, who actually does have a wide variety of different male fertility products. We really love using their male prenatal, their male multivitamin. It's one of the best I've seen on the market in terms of high therapeutic dosing of essential nutrients and antioxidants to support concentration, motility, morphology, all those great things with sperm that we want to be helping. So make sure you check it out. You can head over to thisisneeded.com and use the code Dr. Kelsey for 20% off your first order. I hope you guys enjoy, and I'll see you all in the next episode. Hello, and welcome back to the Fertility Confidence Podcast. And thank you to David for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Kelsey.
I am really excited. I love talking about male fertility. I think it's fertility in general is still not really talked about enough in our mainstream society, but I think male fertility even still is not a very loud topic in medicine. So I'm really excited to get to talk to you a little bit about fertility for men and what that looks like. But why don't we start with you just sharing a little bit about who you are and your story and what brought you into the fertility space?
Yeah, thanks, Kelsey. So a little bit about my journey, actually, my fertility journey. So me and my wife, we actually lived in Australia for 6-7 years, a few years ago now, and we had been trying for a while. We went to get some tests done, and quickly realised I had a low sperm count, but in the grand scheme of things, that didn't really mean anything because you only need one sperm to fertilize an egg. So that wasn't really necessarily a problem. But the consultant we saw at the time said, hey, I think you guys need to maybe think about IVF because you've been trying for a short while now. We then moved back to the UK for personal reasons. And to be honest, since we moved back at that time, we saw so many different consultants, and so many different consultants gave so many different opinions in terms of what was going on. And that causes some confusion. So, 8 years of trying, we actually learned so much going through that process. It wasn't a great process, particularly for my wife, having to go through so many injections daily. So I can really empathize with women who go through IVF. But then also looking at the male factor side being extremely important because men generally don't talk about these things. And I didn't have anybody to talk to all those years ago because it wasn't a cool thing to do. And it was quite a new thing as well, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think it became quite apparent that most of the issues were always, or most of the assumptions were around, women having the issue.
Yeah.
And our own journey kind of made it realize, actually, it's not just my wife. I'm part of that issue too. We look at stats now, 1 in 6 couples globally have issues conceiving naturally, and 50% is down to us, but not that we ever like to admit that. So it's been somewhat a very challenging experience from my point of view and our story. I still remember the first time my wife actually went for egg collection, and I was actually terrified because I didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
You kind of feel quite vulnerable, I think, when you're in that moment and in that space, having gone through that journey. There's not really anybody to talk to from my perspective. You hear lots of buzzwords from medical doctors, and you sit there and you just kind of think, well, what does that actually mean?
Right.
And the more we kind of was on our journey together, we learned so much trying, and we had tried for 8 years, and then we decided enough's enough, because what I found after 2 years, there was so much more information that was missing, and then 2 years became 4 years. And then I got told something else after 4 years from somebody, but nobody told me at the time.
Right.
And that caused so much confusion. So our journey has been somewhat quite complicated and quite complex, in a sense of having so much different information being shared to us. No real concrete information of why things aren't working. We actually fall into the category of unexplained infertility. Generally, I'm quite fit and healthy, don't smoke or do drugs or anything like that. So that's something that's always been kind of mind-boggling for me, I think. So we lived in Australia, and everyone, was kind of eastern suburbs, and we were quite fit, healthy, good nutrition. So that really kind of even confused us even more why things actually weren't working, to be honest. So, but I think there's been some positives having gone on that journey, because we've actually, I think we've come to terms and come to peace with where we are on our fertility journey. But we've learned so much over that time, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. I get to talk to a lot of women on the journey, and even like my clients and my patients. I often get to meet both partners, but I spend a lot more time with the women, and I love being able to hear the male perspective, especially going through the IVF process. Like, how did you find the appointments with all the various practitioners and clinics that you guys saw, in regards to how they focused on you versus just focusing on your wife? Did you feel like there was a bit of a discrepancy just in the fertility world as a whole when you compare men versus women going through the process?
Absolutely. I mean, we're not even involved in the conversations at all. So sometimes we'd be sitting there having our consultation, and the focus is purely on my wife, right? So this is what we're going to do to you. This is the blood test we need to do. This is the timings we're thinking. We need to look at the lining of the uterus, make it nice and thick, 8 millimeters thick. And this is the protocol we're going to be using. For me, it was kind of like, in some ways, it felt like I didn't need to even be in the room.
Right. Show up on the day.
Absolutely. You show up.
Yeah.
And it was literally show up, come, don't masturbate for 2 days or have sex, come in, shoot your load, see you later, your job's done. And it was like, really? Like, is that really the case? And I think in some instances, I hear a lot about men not particularly getting involved too much of that process of being there for their partners. I went to every single appointment with my wife because I wanted to be with her on that journey. It's not just her going on that journey on her own and suffering in silence. It's, I want to be there and support her. Despite me not being able to do too much, I'm there just as a support and comfort my wife as much as possible. But there was nothing really directed for me. It was do your job, go away, and that was it. And that kind of felt like I'm not part of the process at all.
Yeah.
Because it takes two to tango, and I definitely wasn't part of that whatsoever. So I think there needs to be a lot more, and I believe there's a lot more now that I think some clinics now do in terms of trying to offer that support for men as well, because it's so much needed.
Yeah, completely agree. And this is a very common complaint I hear as well from clients
Mm.
is, the male partners who are trying to very actively be involved in the process, and they're like, no one's even really talking to me or addressing me in these appointments. So for our listeners who are sharing this with their husbands or their partners, and they're of that headspace of like, yeah, I want to be involved, like how can I help you more? Do you have any tips for them on how they can help advocate or even just be there for their partners through this process?
I think anyone going through this process, particularly as a couple, I mean, yes, the majority of the burden's on the women, but I think
Mhm.
as men we need to, and some people think this is, why would I do this? But you think you're with your partner for a reason. Okay, so you're there to love and support no matter what, whether you're married or whether you're just, as a couple not married. But I found that giving my wife foot massage really helps because it really relaxes her.
Yeah.
Everybody's very different. Everybody responds differently, but simple things like even making dinner most nights or massage or just like a spa treatment or something that she can do to take her mind off things. But
Mhm.
then equally thinking about how can you do something together as a couple.
Yeah.
So whether it might be going out shopping, whether it might be going for a walk in a park, anything that kind of deviates from just purely focusing on, I need to take my injections or this is the time, we have to try for a kid. And I think when you take that out of the equation, it becomes a lot more simpler in terms of you're not focusing too much negative energy. And I think you need that positivity around you and your wife. So I think the best support is just being there, listening to her. I think you need to have really good dialogue with your
Mhm.
partner,
Yeah.
and show that you actually want to be involved on a daily basis, because I think that's something that she will definitely value.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love prescribing like a date night where it's not around ovulation. You're not allowed to talk about fertility or anything that you're
Yeah.
doing or any appointments coming up. Like, I usually recommend to my patients, think about something that you and your husband did before you got married or before all of this started. What's something you used to do for fun together that life got busy and then now this fertility stuff is going on and it's taking up all your brain space. Let's plan a night, a day, a weekend, what have you. It doesn't have to be anything big and fancy, but that kind of just helps you to connect on that level of before you were this couple going through the fertility space. And I think it's so valuable to find that connection and to really actually take the fertility off the table, even if it's just a night a week or a night a month, if that's all you can really get away for, where it's like, we're just gonna be us. We're not gonna be us, the couple that are trying to get pregnant. We're just gonna go back and remember like what it was like before. And hopefully that can take some of that pressure off of the relationship, especially because it can get very challenging.
Absolutely. I totally agree with all your points, because when you think about your relationship before IVF or going through fertility treatment, it was probably somewhat so different. And
Mm-hmm.
you generally get lost in that moment because you're so anxious about having a baby or having to do something at the right time. You tend to forget
Yeah,
everything else. Everything else goes out the window completely.
right.
And that causes lots of stress and frustration with you and your partner. So I think you're right. All the date nights, the celebrations, how you used to celebrate as a couple is yeah, absolutely so important.
Yeah, completely. What is I'd love to get your take on kind of how men are maybe a little bit different from like a life coaching kind of style and industry compared to women. Like, how can we support men's mental health through the fertility journey a little bit better?
It's a good question. I think probably the same way as we should be listening to women. Women need to listen to their men, and it's really interesting because men generally don't speak about these things.
Right.
One, because we're men and we've got egos. Uh, that's true. We all got
Yep.
most of us men have got egos, And generally, if we're seen talking about it, particularly in an environment around guys, let's say you're in a bar, you wouldn't get 6 guys sitting in the bar having a drink talking about, hey, guess what? I've got a low sperm count.
Right.
It just doesn't happen. So I think as much as we're transparent, or we should be more transparent with our partners, I think our wives also need to be asking what can they do for us and what support do you think is needed? Because men generally suffer in silence compared to women. Women generally have a lot more of a network group, and they're very more open to talking about their stresses and their struggles, whereas men generally will just sit in silence, very isolated, and not have any discussions about this whatsoever. So I think it's really the identification of how well do I know my partner? Is he behaving the same way as normal? If not, what support can I give him? Or then you may have like group of friends where you go, hey, look, can you have a chat with David or someone, because I think he's, we're going through a process. And I was just thinking is a bit of some male bonding time, or just somewhere where you can kind of have a bit of fun, again, as you said, together, but equally on your own. And I think that's quite important. So kind of that acknowledgement is, I call it the awareness, because the awareness is so important. And I guess the coaching part, you're kind of coaching each other in the sense of how are you feeling, what does the day look like, what can we work on as a couple. And I think having those open conversations every day with your partner, I think that's really, really important. So as equally as much as we look after our wives and partners, I think from a women's point of view, they could do equally exactly the same.
Reciprocated, absolutely. We run a challenge called the Conceive Together Challenge, and when I was building that out, a part of what I wanted was at the end of the day for both partners, whether they listen to the challenge separately or together, there was then a piece of homework for them to come in and have kind of a daily check-in with each other. And, it was a very short experience. I usually gave them some prompts that went with what we learned about that day. But my hope was that this would kind of spark that continuing long term for them, even if it's maybe not every night, but just like a quick, hey, now, like, how you doing? I got 5 minutes. Do you need to talk about it? And helping to sort of hopefully facilitate that. Because everything you said is so true. I see it with my patients all the time. And even with my men who are very involved and proactive and supportive, I find they still tend to hold back on sharing how they're feeling, because they don't want to necessarily be open and vulnerable with their partners, especially, but because they don't want to burden them anymore. They see them hurting and they're like, well, I don't necessarily want to put more on top of that. And that's where like therapy really comes into play. I think whether you go together or separate, especially for men, which is still a very taboo topic in and of itself, but so helpful and so important if you are someone who struggles with opening up, like having a third party person that isn't a friend can also be really helpful to get you comfortable with starting to share those things.
Absolutely. And I think the more men that do speak up, the better it becomes, because then it reduces, mental health is really big these days. So when you've got male infertility or IVF on top of that as well, there's huge pressure for a man and for the relationship. So I think it's so important to be comfortable being uncomfortable in terms of speaking up and reaching out to friends, colleagues, work colleagues, or your whoever it may be, because I think it's so important these days.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, fertility is such a lonely journey to begin with. And then I always think back of, for men, I think it's actually even lonelier sometimes. And I had a few years ago, I had patients and they had pretty significant male factor. So we knew that's what we were dealing with. And she was sharing with me that, he does feel a bit weird at work. No one knows he's like going through all of this. They've been at this for years. And we finally kind of got to a place with him where she said she knew one of the wives at work and that they had been talking, and she knew that they had also been going through infertility, but the husbands hadn't shared with each other yet. So she's like, we kind of like encouraged them to open up. And after a while they did and they had very similar kind of things going on in their journey, which was great. So he got like a little fertility buddy at work to kind of like talk and share with. But what ended up happening with that conversation is it actually came out that there was like 5 other dudes in their office
Wow.
that were all pretty much in the same boat. And she was like, I can't imagine, he went for years, he went through thinking, like, logically knowing he's not the only one in the world that's like going through this, but really feeling isolated in his day-to-day life, to all of a sudden having, quite a few men who, for various different reasons, and some of them male factor, some of them not, but actually going through the fertility experience at the same time. And it was really, really comforting for them and helpful. And now, encouraging other people to open up is something we always try to kind of weave into our treatment plans, because you will, given the statistics, like David said at the beginning, like you will likely find someone, maybe that's not going through it in the exact same way that you are, but that has been there and shared some of the thoughts that you have, for sure.
Absolutely. I think, talking about the workplace, I mean, we think about policies in work, don't we, in terms of what's out there in terms of well-being. And fertility, particularly from a male point of view, is so much needed. So even like having group sessions in workplaces are really, really important. And that's I'm hoping that's there's a lot more noise out there in terms of providing that support in workplaces for men as well, because sometimes that could be a good starting point.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. I mean, they're already there 9 to 5. So what a great place to try to capture them all together.
So true. So needed.
I love that. When you guys were going through the process, David, like what did you find were some of the big gaps in care? Like where, coming out now and being able to sort of look backwards, where do you feel the fertility, I hate to use the word like business, but essentially sort of where do they need help when it comes to connecting the dots and helping men specifically feel like they're more part of the process?
Yeah, it's a good question. So you mentioned the gaps. So I think predominantly with the gaps, I think there's a lack of testing early on in the process. And then that's usually women like, let's get her in, let's do all these tests, let's charge thousands of dollars and that's it. But I think the testing for men up front is so important, because it will change the outcome in terms of what journey do you need to go on before you start IVF, before you spend so much money, but then 2 equally before you put that stress on your partner.
Yeah.
So early testing is for me is bread and butter. So get a semen analysis done. Go and see a urologist as well. And I say that because I'm very happy to share. I found out after 4.5 years, that I had a varicocele.
It took that long.
But nobody actually told me this before, and I was like,
right.
What? So, but yeah, I just thought that's quite important to mention that. So semen analysis and urologists, very, very key, I would say, to start with, because that's the gap that's needed before even thinking about going to do IVF or IUI or ICSI. In our case, it was ICSI. So that's for people who don't know. ICSI is more where you would select some sperm, predominantly the best healthy sperm, and then they'll use one to penetrate the egg. Whereas IVF is a different process. You have the egg in the dish and then all sperm swimming around, hoping one will penetrate. So ICSI is more a bit more complex than the standard IVF. But it's coming back to the gap part. I think that the testing is so important. Equally, I think it's the emotional support as well. That's a big gap, because there generally isn't anybody from a male point of view to talk to. I know some of the clinics that we've gone to, you'd have your IVF round, and then you may get one counsellor appointment if you want to use that for an hour, and that's it. It's like, thanks so much, off you go. Right. But there's nothing done pre-IVF from talking to somebody. So I think that's the emotional support from clinics beforehand. I think they need to take that into consideration as well, as opposed to treating it just like a factory. So in some cases, Going to some clinics, it's like a factory, one in, one out, next, next, next. It's a revenue generated business and
Yeah.
industry. And the emotional attachment that isn't really there from the beginning. From a female point of view, probably a little bit more, but from a male point of view, completely not.
Yeah.
Those things are really important. Equally, I think there's things like diet and exercise. So they all play a big part, because sometimes you don't know that things, what you're eating, what you're drinking, can cause a significant impact on your fertility. Certain coffee types, particularly if they've got lots of toxins in them, like smoking, drugs, alcohol, all these things will damage your DNA fragmentation, which doesn't help in terms of producing healthy sperm, which then won't produce a healthy embryo, which will then predominantly not turn into a blastocyst after 3 to 5 days, which is what you're looking for ultimately. So I think there's quite a few gaps like that. The environmental factors, toxins in the air, plastics. There's so many different factors. So I think those are the gaps in terms of what I needed, to kind of from a male point of view.
Yeah. I always explain to my like kind of skeptical male clients, I'm like, listen, the cool thing is we actually have really great research in male fertility because it's way easier to take a semen sample, give you a supplement for 3 months and take another semen sample than it is for us to do any sort of testing and research in women. You have to do IVF. That's where basically all of the female factor fertility research comes from. But in men, it's so easy. So we have a plethora of nutrition research and lifestyle research and environmental toxins and how that impacts and supplements and all the things that we can do so much good when it comes to positively impacting male fertility with strategies that actually have the science to back them up versus just saying like get healthier, which is kind of all you're going to get from the fertility clinic typically, because like you said, they're sort of like on that conveyor belt system. And everyone who listens to the podcast knows that I'm very much not anti-medication or IUI or IVF. We help our clients through every phase of their journey. And some couples do need to use medication and IUI and IVF to be successful, but we can't ignore the fact that there's a lot of good we can do either before we get to that point or simultaneously to make sure that we're actually increasing your success chances, which is, what everyone is signing up for essentially, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm in Canada too. And I just want to make a note about the testing piece, because this is a big gripe of mine as well, of men just not being tested until sometimes well past the 1 year mark. And so I'll have women reaching out to me and saying like, what can my partner do? We're just starting out. And I always say like, I don't care if you guys have not tried at all, or if you've been trying for 6 months, like go and get a semen analysis done. You can request that. You can pay for one. Like there's at-home options now if we have to go that route. But get that information because like you said, David, it can literally change the trajectory of your entire experience. And I share a story all the time when we're talking male factor about how early in my career, I got really laser focused on the female part of the couple that I was working with and didn't think anything about her husband. And then it turned out that he had very, very little sperm. They had to do IVF. And I was like, wow, I wasted a year of your time by not doing that testing right out the gate like I should have. And now it's like a very quick, anyone and everyone that will listen to me, I'm like, you're not trying yet, but you want to next year, go get a semen analysis. Like we can do so much the earlier we actually have that information. And then, the urology piece here too, I find is not a very quick referral. And I'm often the one on the care team saying like, hey, yeah, your numbers aren't, dreadful, but they're not great. And let's go and just make sure we're not missing anything physical before we start like hammering your body with supplements and all these things. And then it's not working. Let's make sure that we have all the other pieces of the puzzle aligned so that what we're doing has the best chance.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many other factors for men. Sometimes people think about unexplained infertility and they just think, oh, maybe it's your diet, but there's actually a lot more involved in
Yeah.
that. Things like chromosomes, hormones, all these additional things that, people don't often talk about so much. So
Yeah.
test, test, test. Absolutely. It's kind of the key to kind of identifying new things before spending so much money and so much time and the emotional journey that you will go on that you may not need to go on if you do the testing first.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Tell us more about fertility for men.
Yes, fertility for men. I actually started fertility for men about 5 years ago, actually. And initially, it was just on Instagram, putting a post out, and I wanted to share more or raise more awareness around male infertility.
Mhm.
And at the time, if I'm honest, I was actually too scared to put my face out there because no one talked about this stuff. No one talked about that stuff at the time. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? But I really wanted to connect because I heard from other people that men were struggling but not saying anything. By that time, I kind of stopped for a while because we were still on our fertility journey. And then I continued to pick it up because I'm really passionate about sharing that knowledge to other men because I've been on that journey. I know exactly what it's like. I see it from a very unbiased point of view. So fertility for men is more about sharing science-backed information that's unbiased, and it's a platform that can help men and even couples actually, because sometimes men will reach out to me, but sometimes it's more women that will reach out to me for their
Yeah.
partners, which is really interesting. But it's also a way to give back as well. Um, if it's okay, I'm also going to be launching a summit soon for on fertility for men, where I've spoken to lots of experts in the field of fertility, and I'll also be launching a course for men specifically, which I'm really excited about. So there's lots of new things coming up with fertility for men, and I'm really excited to be contributing and sharing as much knowledge as possible for men that actually need that support, who are isolated, alone, and kind of suffering in silence. So, I would encourage men out there, don't feel ashamed about this. You're not alone. There's so many other people. And if you think about how many men in the world there are who are currently going through these difficult times, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I love that. And where can they find you on Instagram?
You can go to at fertility 4 as the number 4 men, and all the information's on there. People can feel free to reach out to me. I have a newsletter as well, so people can sign up to what I call the mail.
I love that.
So yeah, there's I share some of my story, and I share like monthly tips in terms of what you can do to improve your reproductive health from a male point of view.
Awesome. I'll make sure that's in the show notes, and maybe the summit information, we'll make sure we put that in the show notes and your course, everything there, so that you guys can find out more from David. This was a wonderful conversation. I think, I love everything that you're doing, because I really do feel like this is a very unrepresented aspect of the fertility journey. So the more noise, the better. And how I kind of wrap up every episode is asking our guests for one piece of fertility advice that you'd love to leave for a listener.
I would say, well, it's probably loads of different advices I would give, but I think one thing would be get tested early and don't suffer in silence.
Yeah, I love that. And especially for men, I think that's so important, because it's so much more common for the women to, search for help and to
Mm-hmm.
research and read and do the things and book the appointments. And I think it's really important for men to understand that there are resources out there for them to get that kind of support too. So thank you so much, David. I really appreciated getting to know you. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Dr. Kelsey. I appreciate it.